It is a wonderful pleasure to welcome Danielle Todd to this podcast. She is a musician based in Ontario, and she's also the host of a wonderful podcast, None of Us Are Normal. How are you today, Danielle? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm good and happy Thanksgiving. We're recording this on Thanksgiving, so
Oh, yeah. And just so everyone knows, Canadian Thanksgiving is almost a month and a half earlier than American Thanksgiving.
yes. So I get to celebrate twice because I'm actually living in Nashville right now. So
Oh, awesome.
yeah.
So do you split your time between Nashville and Ontario then?
So I live here in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm from Guelph, Ontario originally, but I moved here about 7 years ago to do music full time. So I just bought a house 2 years ago. We built a studio on our property. So that's kind of our focus is the studio music. I perform downtown a lot, but when COVID hit, it kind of stopped me from coming home. So last summer was kind of the first summer that I was able to come back and sort of do some performances. And so this year I'm hoping to focus more on some Canadian Ontario performances again.
I see. How was your last trip back home?
It was amazing. So I every every year since I was about 15, I've performed at a place in Sauble Beach called Two Chicks Cafe. And I kind of grew up playing there. They really took a chance on me when I was just a little girl, really playing. And they let me come back every single year for the August long weekend. And it is one of my favorite gigs of all time. I played a bazillion stages. I played all over the world, and that one is still just my favorite. It's really a beautiful weekend, and I look forward to it every year.
I see. So I suppose an advantage would be that you get to avoid the Canadian winter. So how's Nashville during the winter?
Yeah, Nashville is funny because they get like two kind of snowfalls in the year approximately, and it's about 1 to 2 inches, and the whole place shuts down. Which is at first when I thought I moved here, I thought that was kind of crazy. Like, how could you shut down with just 2 inches of snow? But they're just not prepared. Like, they have one snow plow for the entire city of Nashville, and they don't have salt for the roads or anything. And so I thought like, oh, I've driven in this my whole life. I can do it. And I went out and I drove, and it was freaking dangerous. So when it snows here, we hunker down. But I actually miss the Canadian winters.
Really?
Yeah, which I didn't think I would. I really thought that I didn't like Canadian winters. But what I do miss, I guess I don't miss the whole winter. I don't miss the 6 months of complete freeze, but I do miss the snow and the feeling of Christmas in December. There's a lot of Christmas activities here, a lot of Christmas lights and stuff. But when it's t-shirt weather in December, it's kind of weird. So I do sometimes miss that sort of part of the winters.
I see. I find that I've lived in Canada for 4 years as an undergraduate, and I find that there are two things that I miss in Canadian winter, and neither of them being the weather. One of which is I get to have an excuse to buy hot chocolate and marshmallows, and I dip those marshmallows into the hot chocolate, and it tastes really good.
Yeah.
And secondly, and this is something that I miss about Canada in general, is that you guys have Tim Hortons, and it briefly got me into coffee for a while, and I can never taste any other coffee because it's not as good.
That's so funny. So where are you located now?
Budapest, Hungary.
Wow, I'm gonna have to come visit you. I'd love to travel.
Yeah, I look forward to
That's
it.
really cool. There's some things that I really miss about Canada, and it's always the random stuff. Like, my fans actually know that I miss Bix pickles a lot. And they actually make them in the States, but they don't sell them here. And so when I go home, I go to Costco and I get a bunch of cases of Bix pickles. And whenever anybody comes to visit me, they always bring me Bix pickles because it's like one time I had a fan, I just, I reached out, I said, is anybody coming to Nashville? I ran out of pickles, and a fan just mailed me a bunch of jars of pickles because it's just the weirdest thing, like something like that. You wouldn't think that that would be what would remind you of home, but that is one of my big things is the Bix pickles.
Yeah, and I've never tried it actually. What does it taste like?
They're just a delight. They are like garlic dill, and they're just super crunchy. They don't have any dyes in them, which a lot of the pickles down here have dye. And yeah, I don't know what it is. I just can't find a pickle down here that I like as much as Bix. So that's my thing. And it's funny because before I moved down here, I didn't eat Bix pickles all that much, but now I eat them all the time because I live here and it's like a delicacy for me now.
Oh, okay. Well, I've never had a taste for pickles, and yeah, I don't think I ever will. But so yeah, more power to you. Yeah, and
Yeah.
so you've mentioned moving to Nashville for the music. So tell me about the circumstances that led you to where you are.
Yeah. So it was about 7 years ago, I guess, maybe even a little bit more than that now. I was visiting Nashville about twice a year. And every time that I would come down, I would do writers' rounds, and everybody at the writers' rounds would say, "You're really good. Can you write with me in 2 weeks? Or can you write with me, next month or whatever?" And at that time, Zoom writes weren't really a thing. And I would have to say no, like I'm going home, but I'll let you know next time I'm in Nashville. And then I would come back 6 months later, and by that point, they would have kind of forgotten about me or forgot who I was. They only met me that one night, and it's just there's so many people that come to town, and so I kind of got frustrated. Like I would get such a good response while I was there, but then I wouldn't really be making these connections. And I spoke to a drummer one day, and he just said to me, "You got to move. If you want to make these connections and you want to keep them, then you got to move down here, and that's the only way." And I was driving home in my van, and I got home and I walked into, at that time, I had my first kind of grown up job. I was working at Investors Group in Guelph as a financial advisor's assistant. And I walked in and I sat down and I just said, "Hey, boss, I'm going to move to Nashville." And he actually said, "I was waiting for you to say that." And he said, "I'm really happy for you." And so he said, "Just make sure that you get a good replacement for me." So that's what I did with my job. I replaced myself, and I just decided like I was going to move down, and I didn't really have a plan. Like I didn't know when I was going to come home. I didn't know how long I would be gone, but I just kind of packed up. I had a 1999 Honda Odyssey, and I thought, well, if worse comes to worse, I have a whole entire van that I can sleep in. So I won't be too bad off if I run out of money or whatever. And I moved down here, and that was 7 years ago. And since then I've performed. Broadway as a whole. That's my job. People think it's a career, but it's a job. And I worked really hard on Broadway for a lot of years, just making money, trying to survive, and really learning a lot of skills. And then I met my husband, who is a record producer, and he produced my songs that I have released. And we got married 2 years ago, and then of course we bought our house, and we built the studio on our property. So pretty much I'm just being in Nashville, you are constantly surrounded by music. I found that it was, at the time, Ontario was kind of lacking that, especially country music. Now, since I've moved down here, the Ontario country music scene has kind of blown up and is doing really well. However, when I was, 7 years ago, it was just kind of starting. It wasn't as prevalent as it is now. And that's the thing in Nashville. You have everybody is like-minded. Everybody thinks like you. Everybody is thinking about lyrics and about melodies and about storytelling. and about voice and learning about voice. Whereas back home, you have people who are interested in all sorts of different things, business and accounting, and but everyone here is doing music. It's Music City. And so that's where I kind of just felt like I belonged here.
I see. I do come across at least a couple of Canadian country musicians who have settled themselves in Nashville because they want to advance their music careers and such. I wonder if you've come across some of them yourself.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, a lot. There are a lot of Canadian musicians here. Actually, when I first moved to town, I met a, a guy named Tyson Haynes from Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. And I ended up in a band with him a couple of weeks after I moved to town. And that's who I played with for about 3 years, was Tyson. And so it was just kind of funny because, we're both Canadian and we both moved here and we just kind of hit it off and started that band. And then there's Callie McCullough down here, and she's a fantastic country artist who's not only she was actually the only person I knew when I moved down here, and she was a family friend before I moved, and she does really beautiful music. And then of course there's just like people make fun of Canadians because it's like we come down here and we just like congregate together and we find our people, so there's a lot of us.
Mhm. I actually met Callie on this podcast.
Oh
She's
yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. She's a really good friend of mine, a family friend. Her mother um, used to play in a band, and my dad played in a band. And my dad was a few years older than her mother, and her mom used to go and watch my dad perform, and they would be friends. And so, longtime family friend with Callie. So she's wonderful.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the cultural differences between Canadians and Americans that you can notice?
Um, I feel like there's a lot of differences, but there's also a lot of similarities too. Um, in the South, I remember when I moved down here, like especially on my drive down here, I pulled over and I got gas, and there was a gentleman on the other side pumping his gas, and he just said, "Hey, darling, how's it going?" And I kind of said, "Good." And
Mhm.
he said, "Nice day, isn't it?" And I said, "Yeah." And I was thinking to myself, like, what does he want? Why is he talking to me? But he was just like chatting. And I find that in the South, there's a lot of that. And people just go out of their way to make you feel comfortable here. Whereas in Canada, people are super, super duper friendly and welcoming and accepting of you, but they I guess sort of keep to themselves a little bit more until you speak with them. So I noticed that kind of right away. Um, of course, the pickles are different. That was a big thing. Um, and the food. But honestly, I've traveled so much. I've lived in Australia, and I was in England for a little while. And I find that everywhere you go, there are people on both sides of everything. There are people politically on both sides, no matter where you're at in the world. There are people who have different views than you, or people who have the same views than you. And it's hard to kind of clump America into one and Canada into one.
Mhm. I understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Based on my experience in Canada, I can say the same thing in that I know that outside of Canada, people have a view, almost a stereotypical view that Canadians are friendly, and it's certainly true to an extent. But like you said, they hesitate to let people into their closer circle.
I find that it's almost like Canadians don't want to bother you. Like if they don't think to reach out, like when they're pumping their gas, they just doing their own thing and they don't want to bother you. Whereas here, like people kind of just talk to anybody sort of thing. And I do find that is slowing down a little bit here though as well. Like people are kind of staying to themselves a little bit more. And I think that I think that maybe the pandemic may have made that sort of climate change in how people are with each other. They just kind of stick to themselves a little bit more. But I do think that Canadians are very welcoming. Man, when I'm playing downtown, I can spot a Canadian from a mile away, which I never thought when I first moved here I couldn't, but now I can tell if there's a group of Canadians walk in. I know it almost immediately. And the dead giveaway is the Blue Jays hat or the Maple Leafs hat that, that they wear, right? And so, or, you know, I can hear their accents, or they're just walking in and they're larger than life, making friends with everybody down here. So it's kind of funny. You can spot them. You can spot Canadians. So there is definitely some sort of Canadian thing to a Canadian, I guess.
Yeah, I see. Nevertheless, before settling into Budapest, I lived for a year in Vienna, and I can tell you that the city is known for its scenery, but not for its people for a reason, because it looks beautiful, but the people are incredibly detached and I think very unfriendly to, I guess, outsiders.
Yeah, okay, interesting. I felt that way in England, and English people are my favorite people on this earth. I think they are one of the funniest groups of people that I've ever met is English people. I just think that they have the funniest humor. But they're very guarded. Like I remember being downtown London out with a couple friends, and it was, you know, my turn to go and buy the rounds for everyone. So I went to the bar, and on the way to the bar, I would talk to this person and then this person and then this person, get to the bar, get my round, talk to the bartender, and then talk to everybody on the way back. And when I got back to the table, everyone at the table was mad because I took so long to get their round.
Oh.
And so the next time it was my turn, they would ask for the money and they would go get it for us because they're like, oh, you're Canadian and you're going to talk to everybody. And it was funny because I would talk to everybody, and I just thought that that was normal. And I remember like when you first, like for example, on the tube, the underground, the subway, if I bumped into someone, I would say, oh, sorry. And they would look at me like, why are you talking to me? And I'd be like, how's it going? But then they would be really funny and they would start to talk to me and say, you know, it's really weird that you're talking to me on the subway. And so I found that English people really stayed to themselves until you got them out of their shell. And then they are the funniest people in the world. My favorite culture is England.
Mhm. Yeah. Also, you've mentioned that, you know, people having different political views where you are, and I wonder if has that ever been an obstacle for you, like differing political views and such?
You know, politically, I don't like to involve that in my career.
Mhm.
And I don't like to talk about politics at all. I never have. It's not my thing. I think it divides people. It does not bring people together. And I find that over the last few years, and I think it is similar maybe everywhere, but politics has been sort of in the forefront. And I don't like it. I don't like to really talk about it with people. And I don't like when people have strong views and don't accept other people's views or think poorly on somebody else because they have different views than you do. And so when I get stuck in a situation where I have to speak about politics or where there's somebody that has a different view than me, I don't really necessarily want to argue about politics because I just don't think it's worth it. You know, I just don't think that people change their minds all that often, especially on like a Facebook post or, you know, something like that. And when I'm performing in Nashville or anywhere really in the world, I don't want to bring politics into my performance. And that has been a little bit of a struggle in Nashville because the South is pretty political. And so when somebody walks in and starts chanting some sort of political chant or something, it's annoying for me because nobody comes to Nashville to talk about politics. Nobody comes to go on vacation to be angry or riled up. in my mind, I don't know, maybe some people do, but like I think that most people come to town to forget about all of that and forget about the angry things and the angry parts of the world. And so with music, I like to avoid that as much as I can.
I see. Yeah. I wonder, I have a certain hypothesis in that, throughout COVID, I know that parts of Europe have stricter lockdown measures than even in Canada. And I went through COVID in Canada, and I find some of its lockdown measures pretty, pretty strict, I'd say. Um, so my hypothesis is that the the amount of, say, resistance that ordinary people have to government lockdown measures show to what extent are the people in general pro or antisocial. Like if people are antisocial, then not they would not resist, or resist very little to the COVID lockdown measures. But if they are, you know if they like to meet people and to socialize, then the resistance would be stronger. So I wonder, so what was the were people hoping to be social again when you were spending time in Nashville during COVID?
I think that it was just really split down the middle. Where I was, a lot of people here were against the lockdowns simply because they did not have the financial means to get through it. There was not the support here that there was really, like in Canada at the time, I guess. So those people that didn't want to shut down, I think, was more a financial thing than it was a social thing. Also, Nashville was like the first place in the world to open. So it was Florida and then Nashville.
Mhm.
So we went back to work almost right away. Um, and I didn't really have many options at the time for me because I was not an American citizen, so I wasn't able to get, unemployment in America, and I didn't want to take the what was it whatever the amount, I forget what it was called in Canada. I didn't want to take that money because I wasn't currently in Canada. I wasn't staying there. I wasn't using that system. So I was kind of unable to get support from either country. And I probably likely would have been able to get support, I guess, from Canada. I don't know. But I I don't know. I just didn't feel like it was right for me to take that support from the Canadian government. And so we went back to work almost right away. But the funny thing that happened was Nashville opened up, and not even 2 weeks later, the entire town shut down voluntarily because everyone got sick. So everyone got COVID, and there were no bartenders and there were no managers and there was nobody to open up the bars and everything. So Nashville opened and then closed almost right away. Like not everybody, you could still come to Nashville. It wasn't a government run thing, but most bars had to shut down because they all got sick at once. So it was a really bizarre, weird time, especially because back home everyone was shut down and locked down. And so it was weird to like call my family and be like, okay, well, I'm gonna go out to the bar tonight to play a show, and everyone else back home is like, not leaving their house and hadn't left their house for a couple months or whatever. So just a weird time to be alive.
Yeah, I think so too. I know that when the vaccines are derived, like there was also like a huge controversy over the vaccines. I take all of them because I need them to take to fly to my home country, and as well as to Europe, right? But yeah, there are people who were like really refusing to take them, like, and and yeah, there was a whole hullabaloo there. So I wonder. So I'm guessing you are fully vaccinated now. You don't have to worry about that.
I was vaccinated. Yeah, I was vaccinated, and I was not scared of it.
Mhm.
So yeah, I wasn't really scared of the vaccine, and I didn't have any problems with it, so which is good.
Yeah, glad to hear it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I got my first two in Canada, and I got my last two when I finally got to Hanoi.
In Illinois.
No, Hanoi, Vietnam. Sorry, I forgot to mention that I that's where I was born and raised.
Oh, cool! Wow, right on. I would love to go there. I went to Thailand, and everyone in Thailand said to go to Vietnam. Said it was beautiful there, so I'd love to go there one day.
Yeah, you might like the food.
Oh my gosh, I'm sure I would. I love Vietnamese, and I love food in general, so I would love to go there for sure.
And I know that the certain areas of the American South, for example, I hear that Louisiana has the same sort of weather patterns as Vietnam, really. So yeah, hot and humid. So
I
that's
was gonna say hot and humid. I didn't know that actually. We went to Thailand last April, and it was very hot and very humid. But I just loved it. I loved the different culture and stuff. I would, is there in Vietnam is because Thailand was very good for English. A lot of people spoke English as a second language. And so we were able to, there wasn't much of a language barrier there. And I was just kind of wondering, is Vietnam the same? Sorry, can you hear my dog barking out there?
no, no, no,
Sorry.
not really.
Okay.
No,
But
no.
is there like that language barrier in Vietnam, or is it similar?
I would say that you will have better luck in the cities. Yeah,
Right.
but uh, but tourists when they come to Vietnam, they would like to visit the countryside, or they would go on a road trip.
Right. Yes. That's what I really liked in Thailand was kind of the country was just beautiful. The mountains, and man, I just love that part of the world. I would love to go back.
Mhm. I think your
Yeah.
best bet would be just to either hire someone or know someone who's bilingual and have them guide you around.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go to Vietnam next.
All right, yeah, let me know. And you're welcome to this side of Europe anytime. It's beautiful.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'd love to.
Right, so I'd like to talk about your podcast since you're a fellow podcast host. Your show is titled None of Us Are Normal. So tell me about that.
I've always had a passion, I guess, for mental health awareness. There are people in my family who struggle with mental health. Also, my sister is a psychologist, she's a doctor. So I hear lots of stories from her. She used to work at the Kingston penitentiaries. So she worked with a lot of the sort of high max security prisoners and all sorts of different things. I mean, she's worked with children, she's worked in hospitals, she has her own, so I kind of grew up listening to her learn, and I was always really interested in it. I was interested in mental health, and I also saw people, in high school struggling with mental health and struggling with just being able to kind of sorry, being able to kind of cope with all of the stresses in high school. And then you get out of high school and you end up in this world and you just have to all of a sudden be an adult. And I always thought that it was like such a lot of transitions, and people don't have the support to deal with it or even know that they might need support to get through those sorts of things. And so I've always been really passionate about it. And a few months ago, I was talking to my creative director from Moons and Things. Her name's Natasha. And I was just talking about mental health and how I wanted to do something with my career. And I was, I wanted to do something a little bit different. And she said, why don't you just start a podcast? And when I first started the first season, it was, I had a couple friends on there. Jessie T was on there, which I know she was on your podcast as well. And I had just a few. I had my sister on there and stuff, and now I'm really focusing on my own solo episodes, which I've really been enjoying, and just getting specialists on there. I'm really excited about the guests that are going to be coming up, because it's all about different ways to help your mental health. And some people think, oh, mental health, it's medication and therapy. But there's botany, there is music, creative writing, there's yoga, there's working out, fitness, hiking, art, all those things. And so I think it's really interesting to know that you can help your mental health in a way that doesn't have to be just sitting on a couch telling somebody how you feel. So that was kind of where I was at with the podcast.
Let's see.
Yeah.
So I think in a month or two, I will be speaking to a man who wrote a book detailing the history of psychiatry in the United States. And the history that he detailed is kind of a horrifying one, because it's a mystery to me, and I'm sure it's a mystery for him too, that the medical profession does not know what to do with the human mind. So they come up with all sorts of really harmful and life altering or even life threatening solutions to it. I mean, off the top of my head, you can think of the lobotomy or something like that. And right now you have a medicine-based psychology that believes that there's a pill for every problem known to man, the human mind at least. And I find that it is inadequate. I know that we've come a long way, the psychiatric profession, since the lobotomy and those like really dehumanizing asylums, but it is still a very underdeveloped field.
Absolutely. I think that the only way to kind of expand that is to have more people open to the idea of mental health is just an illness, or it's just I love this analogy, and it's been said so many times. If you break your leg, you go to the hospital, you get surgery, and you get a cast. And everyone comes around you and they sign your cast and they say, I hope you feel better soon. And, oh, let me push you in your wheelchair. People are so supportive. But then as soon as it becomes mental, as soon as it's in your brain and you say, I feel sad, people feel uncomfortable and they don't know what to do with that. And it's the same thing. It's an illness, physical or mental. It's still an illness. It's a chemical imbalance in your brain. And so I think that it's really important that we start those conversations and we start to be able to be open and talk about things like that, because there's never going to be enough research. We're still researching cancer, and we've been doing that for so long. And I feel like the mind and mental health and medication and all of that stuff, it's very new, but it's not new to the point where there's no cure or there's nothing that doesn't help, because lots of people can go on to medication, like, well, I'm not going to get into medication that you can go on because I'm not a doctor, but you can take antidepressants and it will work for a lot of people. Or maybe sometimes you don't need an antidepressant. Maybe you just need therapy or, exercise or a healthy diet or whatever it is. But some people need a little bit more help than others. And there are treatments that you can do, such as ECTs, and they're doing magnetic therapy. They're doing all sorts of different types of therapy, and a lot of them are trials, like you're saying. But unless we try these things, we're not going to be able to get any closer to some sort of cure or help for people who need it.
Mhm. I do hear that these days there have been talks about experimenting with psychedelics. So
Yeah.
I know that it's been like over prescribed, so to speak, or been overabused in the 60s and 70s, so people have a certain aversion to it. But I guess I'm open to the idea of like a, measured use of the substance.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really actually know too much about that sort of side of things. Like I've never had experience with them or anything. But I mean, if they're doing new research on it, then there has to be a reason why, And I do think that those like micro doses and stuff like that, maybe it might help. Like I think that everybody's journey is going to be different, and everybody's level of support that they need is going to be different too, right? Everybody, it's just like your own physical health journey is going to be different. Some people, it might be they have low iron, and so they need to take an iron supplement, or they need to eat red meat if they're not a vegan, or whatever it is. But then when it comes to your mental health, like they might have this, they might have PTSD, or they might have bipolar, or, and so there's just so many different kind of mental illnesses. And I just, again, like to compare it to a physical illness. You can't blanket treat a mental illness just like a physical illness. You can't give someone with low B12 an antibiotic and say, here you go. Right. So you just everybody has their own sort of journey, I guess.
So what does mental wellness look like for you?
Yeah, I think that mental wellness for me specifically, is still a journey, because I really just want to be better and better and better and better and happier every day. And I think that when I look at my life as a whole, there's different categories that I look at. My financial wellness, my relationship with my husband, my relationship with my family, my career, my hobbies, my, I guess some people would think of faith or religion. And when you look at all those different areas of your life, for me, I like to kind of sort of sit down and think, okay, out of 10, where do I rate this? And where do I rate this? And if you do it once a year, you can kind of gauge how you're doing. Like, okay, financially, say I'm in a lot of debt, and this is the year that I want to work on my finances. And that will make me feel better as a whole. That will make my mental wellness better, because I will have less stress of being in debt, and I will feel a financial freedom, like just off the top of my head. Like that's kind of what I think about mental wellness. And then, even though some people would argue and say like, oh, you don't need money or whatever. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that in my mind, I have kind of, 10 different areas of my life that I look at, and I always try to improve. And I think that is the wellness journey, is just improving who you are, not to everyone else, but to yourself. You want to be a better person every day. Maybe it's you want to wake up earlier, or maybe you want to work out, maybe you want to become stronger. That's one of my goals right now, is I really just want to be stronger. I want to have a stronger heart. I want my cardiovascular health to be better. And so I still consider that mental health, even though that's a physical thing, because when you work out your physical body, it's helping your mental health. So I guess that's kind of a long way around for what I think of mental wellness. Yes.
Mhm. So in reference to the title of my show, and do try to excuse me, but I always want to insert like philosophy in my podcast, where whether the episode is centered on philosophy or not. But I know that even though the great thinkers of the past, they've not like dwelled too much on mental illnesses. I know that some have been like negative states of mind have been explored, but they've never been researched. But philosophers from all the centuries have tried to answer what does a good life look like. And I find that there are two like plausible concepts of it. So one is a good life is one that is that has a positive ratio of positive feelings no for negative ones. So you do have negative feelings, but you try to minimize it as much as possible and try to maximize your positive feelings. So it can go from, say, people like Epicurus or Stoics. And there's another school that says a good life is an ethical one, where you do the right thing, and you try not to fall afoul of a given ethical code, whether it is through religion or through the rational mind. So people like Socrates and Aristotle. So I think those are two viable competing concepts of happiness. But these days, there's a third concept of happiness which I disapprove of, to say the least, and that is you can never be happy unless you have something or you achieve something. And obviously, you think of people who are materialists, right? You think of people who think you can only be happy if you make a certain amount of money every year or you get this certain prized possession like a car or a house. But for some, it can be something like a husband or kids or a certain sense of recognition amongst your peers. So you base your sense of happiness from very external things, and you don't work on your internal self, hence having a very un, unexamined life. And I think it's not something that we should encourage.
Yeah, I tend to agree on that. I say that I chase happiness. Um, but you have to be just what you said, you have to be happy with yourself internally. It's like you can't be happy in a relationship and provide happiness to another person until you are happy with yourself. And I think that that goes true for every area and aspect of your life. And I I kind of would almost agree with the first one that you said there about having positive feelings. Although one thing that I would disagree with is that I do feel that you need positive and negative feelings. I guess to minimize the negative feelings would be great. But also, if you don't have those negative feelings in your life, then you can't really appreciate those positive ones because you don't know what it feels like to be down in the dumps. And so being happy all the time and never feeling sad just feels almost like nothing, like numb. So you kind of have to have those roller coasters. You kind of have to experience grief and loss in your life. And you have to have those down moments, but it just has to, you have to make sure that that you're not wallowing in them, and you accept them and you feel them, and then find ways to cope and ways to get through those moments in your life where you just feel blue, and I think that it's important to feel those feelings because then when you come back up that hill and you're on the top of the hill again, that happy feeling and that view is just 1,000 times stronger when you get there.
Mhm. So do you take what people call these days mental health breaks every now and then?
So, okay, so explain what you would mean by mental health break.
Well, I suppose, as far as I can understand, is it's a period where you press pause on work or whatever you have going on in your life, just so that you can regain your composure in order to keep going in a certain in a state of 100% mindset, I suppose.
Okay. So for me personally, I feel like with age, I guess, if I'm happy in a situation, I have gotten to the point where I will give it a little bit of time, but then I'll walk away from it. Um, I do believe in a mental health break in terms of maybe like a social media break. where I don't go on social media for a little while. I've done that a lot because I really think that social media is pretty hostile.
Mhm.
Um, I like to fill my time with things that are active outside or things that are educational, like podcasts. If I'm cleaning, I'll be listening to a podcast. But I do like to do, like, I guess, a social media cleanse here and there. It is hard with the job that I have to not be on social media just because I'm a podcast host and I'm a musician. So my face needs to be out there for my work. We also run a studio, so that's another thing that brings me online again. So I would say my biggest mental health breaks would be from social media and screens is kind of that's where I guess I would struggle the most, is spending too much time online. And then I really like to, I do like to disconnect. My husband and I are very busy. This is our first year of having the studio open, and we've been working long hours, like 15 hours a day, every day for the last year. And so it's a little bit overkill and it's a lot. And it's kind of just the season that we're in right now. And so when it came up to his birthday this year, he said, I just want to do a staycation and I want to take a couple of days off and stay at home and relax. And I said, okay. And I went ahead and booked us a cabin 3 hours away. And he was like, what are you doing? I thought we were just going to stay here and it was going to be easy. But I knew that we really did need a break and we needed to be disconnected from it. And if we stayed here, that our studio is on our property and somebody's going to call and somebody's going to want to mix, or they're going to want this or that. And I said, no, like, we need this break. And at first he was a little bit irritated because he's like, we decided and we were just going to chill. But then when we got there, we spent 3 days outside. We made all of our meals. We made healthy choices. We walked, we bought kayaks. We were kayaking every day. We were with our dogs. We were in the sunshine. And on the drive home, he just said to me, like, thank you so much for booking that, because that was really actually what we needed. So I guess I do take mental health breaks. But I'm not really like, I guess I do them in my own way, I guess.
Mhm. I see. So you've mentioned doing this a podcast episode with Jesse T, and I listened to it. I think it's wonderful. Um, and and I want to ask, have you breached the conversation about mental health to your fellow musicians?
Yes, I have. Musicians are a funny little bunch. We all have our little quirks and we all have our struggles. One of those things being actually what you mentioned before with your philosophy question is musicians don't have a level of achievement, really. And so if you if a musician pays attention to, say, the number of followers that they have, the number of followers that they can have is as many people that are in the world, and even more, because sometimes people have more than one account. You know what I mean? And so when you hit 1,000 followers, you're like, yeah, I hit 1,000. But then all of a sudden, a few days later, it's not enough anymore. And you get a number one on the radio. And then where do you go from there? You already have the number one. So then you need a second number one and you need a third number one. And there's never anything that says, okay, you've reached the top. This is the best that any musician can ever do. And so, like you said, you have to turn to yourself to be happy. And lots of musicians struggle with that because they find external happiness, they find praise. And I've struggled with this as well, and a lot of the musician life is based on not only talent, but also uh, who you know, how much money you have, and how attractive you are. Cases, there obviously are different cases, but it is an easier road if you are a skinny young woman than it is if you are an overweight older woman. in the country industry, particularly, and I think probably in the pop industry as well. And so you have to be very confident and comfortable and happy with yourself before you can put yourself into the world. Because if you don't like what the world says about what you're doing, you have to be okay with what you're doing, or else there is no happiness there. You know, it can really hurt. And there are bullies online. You know, the majority of my career is online now. It's on TikTok and it's making videos, and people just sit behind their computers and they just say blah 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 blah, you know, all the time. And so musicians have a hard time because they are constantly being judged. And so you have to really check your mental health, and you have to really be in a strong state of believing in yourself and being proud of yourself and believing in what you do. Or else, yeah, it's going to take a mental toll on yourself and your career. And that's why you see so many people. Ed Sheeran is the perfect example. He talks about his mental health struggles a lot because he's just up and down all the time, and he deals with mental health struggles and how, but then he deals with it on such a bigger level because it's in the limelight and he has to be online all the time, and there's so much expected of him when he just wanted to write songs and play in bars, you know. So you have to set your own level of success and your own goals, and reach those goals and be happy with them.
Yeah, and it goes back to what we've discussed earlier, right? And I'm reminded of a recent book title, and I don't know if you're a big reader or not, but I would recommend this one book called, was it From Strength to Strength by Arthur C. Brooks. And he mentions this idea called the striver's curse, where you, like I said, you work so very hard to get what you aspire to, and then you achieve it. And that's probably the worst thing that can ever happen to you, because you have little to no cause to strive for anymore. And I'm sure he mentions this in the book too, but it goes back to my idea of basing your conception of happiness, and of course that entails mental well-being, on what you have rather than who you are. So, you know, those French words, être and avoir, right? Be and have. And it is a tricky situation in this modern age because, and it's especially has to do with like mental illnesses too, right? Like, you don't want to identify too much with whatever mental problems that you are having. Is something like, I have depression, but not I am a depressive, or something like that, or I am depressed. So I think it is a good way to redefine our conception of happiness is, I think, to remove remove the have from the frequency of our vocabulary and start exploring the word be.
Yeah, I see what you mean there. Yeah, I think that it's important to, I think it's really just important to kind of end that stigma in general, because people look at disorders or illnesses, mental illnesses, as a problem. And it is a problem for the person that has it, but it's not a problem for anybody else. In fact, it should be it should be that time where you come together and you support that person with a mental illness. And so I feel like people kind of put this label on it as like, oh, I am depressed, or I have depression. And then people look at it like, ooh, I don't want to, I don't know how to help you. I'm uncomfortable, kind of thing. And I think that it's important to just realized that, gosh, there's a huge amount of people who deal with it. It's actually kind of normal. It's kind of normal to have something wrong with you, in quotations, you know what I mean? It's normal to have ups and downs in your life. It would not be normal to just be happy all the freaking time, no matter what. Um, so yeah, it's a I think that the labels and the stigma behind it just needs to be done. I'm sick of the stigma, really. I'm surprised that that's still part of the conversation, is the stigma behind it. Like, the conversation should be, okay, how do we actually help now? We shouldn't even still be talking about how there is a stigma. Like, I'm just like, my mind is blown that there still is that portion of the conversation. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah, and I also believe that it is in the realm of, say, in the spectrum of individualist and communitarian. We've, at least in Western society, we've leaned way too far over the individualist side of things. And I think we need to tilt the scale back to being more communitarian. Um, because I think individualism at its worst is the mentality that says we are on our own islands, and we can only, like, our job is to just tend to our own gardens and our homes, and yeah, and not give a hoot about the others, so to speak. And that's why when you've disclosed like your certain mental health struggles, people become hesitant, and they believe that that is in the realm of the experts. Like, you should see somebody like that. That's the most that you can expect from somebody in like our society, right? Like, but I think we should come to the idea that we are all incomplete people, and we need people's help almost all the time, and there should be a more like cooperative um way of dealing with our problems. Like, a good example would be like when, say, if you have a given, like, if you've disclosed your mental health troubles, like, and I might say, I obviously I'm not an expert, but there are certain things I could do to help. Like, what do you need? Or I could help you with like certain, like, small things, like buy you a Tim Hortons, and or or hang out with you, or help you with your household needs, something like that. Like, really small things that is in the realm of possibility for everybody.
Yeah, I love everything that you said there. I think that that's really beautiful. I think about, I guess I'm kind of an analogy person, but it does take a village. And if you think about, like, my one of my dreams is to be like a homesteader, right? I want to have my own chickens and eggs, and I want to have my own garden and grow my own food and bake my own bread. But really, being a full-time musician and a full-time business owner and a podcast host and all the things that I do, I don't have time to do those things. But I could do one of those things if I had five other people in my life that could do one other thing. Then somebody could bake the bread, somebody could um, grow the vegetables, somebody could can the vegetables, somebody could raise the chickens, and if we all came together and we had a small village, then we would be able to sustain ourselves. And I think that, just like what you're saying there, if you have a support group around you who is helping you get to and from doctor's appointments, or helping you clean your house, and maybe you have really bad depression, but maybe you something that makes you happy is, say, gardening, then you could say, hey, you know what, I can weed your garden, or I can harvest your garden for you if you come over and help me with my laundry. And I feel like there should be a give and take, and there should be a community of people around you. And unfortunately, not everybody has that. And some people do, but unfortunately, not everybody has that. And I think that if you don't have that and you need a community of people, then reaching out to experts is a good thing, because there's, group therapy, and there's group things that you can be a part of, that you can join. There's classes in a lot of cities and all that sort of thing too, where you can maybe learn or find new friends, or get a new skill, and find people that will be there to support you. Because like you said, sometimes maybe your friends, maybe it's too much of a burden on them to hear about your struggles all the time. So it's got to be a give and a take. um but I do think that, yeah, everybody needs a community around them. Everybody needs a support system for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, and you've mentioned stigma, and I certainly believe that one of the biggest that we have to overcome is I guess, the shame around saying that, we are not adequate, or, it means that there's always well, obviously it means that we can do more to better ourselves, but it can also means that um, we need company, so to speak. We need other people to guide us out, like whatever mess that we dug ourselves in, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that the the stigma thing is honestly such a strange thing. I guess what you say, people don't feel adequate enough if they don't feel like they can go to work because they're having an anxiety attack. Some people may look down on it like, well, almost like, oh, okay, well, I don't want to go to work either. Like, I don't feel like going. But that's two different things. If you don't feel like going to work versus a person who wants to go to work, but they're having anxiety getting out of the house. It's just, I think, understanding. I think that there just needs to be more of an understanding generally in the general population of people who struggle with mental illness, because people who don't struggle with it, and there are people who don't struggle with it, may not really understand that that person doesn't just, that person wants to go to work, but they're struggling to get out of the house. It's not like a laziness. It's not a uselessness. It's not anything like that. It's a actual health problem. And so I think that a universal understanding of mental health would probably help the stigma behind it. And that's the thing, is that I feel like people who struggle with mental health are able and open and willing and ready to talk about it. But people who do not struggle with it, they don't, it's not something that they really feel like they need to talk about, perhaps. I don't know. I'm just that's kind of just off the top of my head, but it's just like me. Like, I don't feel like I need to talk about football because I'm not really interested in it, and it doesn't have anything to do with me. So if you're not struggling with mental health, you might not really care to talk about it or be involved in it. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, yeah, I do understand it. But yeah, it's all about care, really, right? Like, we think it's almost a human duty, I think, to care about your fellows.
Absolutely. And I think that if you have good people in your circle, I think that you will. Like, a lot of people who have mental illness, I don't want them to be scared to reach out to people, because I think that all of your friends would rather you reach out for help than hurt yourself or hurt somebody else. That's the last thing that they want for you. And it's the last thing that they want from themselves, is for their friend to be in so much pain. And so I think that ultimately, if you are struggling, you can talk to your friends, you can talk to your family. If you feel like you can't, then there are a lot of resources out there that you can talk to somebody who does care and who went into this field specifically to help you, you know.
Well, so final question, Danielle. What does music mean to you?
Gosh, it means everything. I was thinking about this the other day. It's funny that you asked that. I was thinking about how if I ever lost my voice, I just don't know what I would do. It almost brought me to tears because, and I have been in that boat before where I physically lost my voice from over singing, and I had to take about 6 months off of singing, and it was awful. I was crying every day, and I thought to myself, like, what am I going to do? Am I just going to be a banker? Like, that's not me. You know, that's not what I want to do. And so music really does heal me. It really makes me connect to people, and it gives me I've already mentioned Ed Sheeran, but I don't know why it's coming to my mind again. Ed Sheeran just released an album, and it is very singer-songwriter style. It's called Autumn. And I've been listening to it the last couple days, and the lyrics in it are so conversational, and it's really hit me. Like, I've really thought to myself, like, wow, these are really brilliant lyrics, even though they sound like they're just kind of easy lyrics, like almost like they just fell out of him, like he was talking to you, like I'm talking to you right now. And that sort of lyricism for me is what really connects with me and what really, you know, reaches my heart. And I just don't, there's nothing else in the world that makes me feel that way. You know, some people have that feeling in their heart when they dance or when they work out or when they cook food or when they paint. But I have it when I listen to music or write music or perform.
Well, on that wonderful note, thank you very much, Danielle Todd, for joining the show.
Thank you.
And happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.